Hi there, everybody, and welcome to today's Art of Procurement podcast. I'm Philip Eidson, the founder and managing director of Art of Procurement. And as we all know, it's a really exciting time to be in procurement, especially with the pace of technological change. And so today's podcast is part of a special sponsored series that's taking part over the last 2 weeks of January 2020, where we aim to shine a light on the emerging and growth companies who are changing the way that leading procurement teams are driving outcomes that truly align with corporate objectives. And so we're going to ask an entrepreneur from 8 different companies questions about what gap in the market their solution addresses, how they differentiate their technology, and what the tools look like in action. It's a great way for you to get to know those who are truly leading the way when it comes to the digitization of procurement. And so in today's podcast, I talked to Alan Holland of Keelvar, and I first asked Alan to share Keelvar's elevator pitch.
Keelvar provides advanced sourcing software for enterprises. We provide a sourcing optimizer product so companies can run large or complex sourcing projects. We also provide a new solution, intelligent sourcing automation for tactical buying. So for higher frequency, less complex sourcing projects, sourcing bots can automate the execution from beginning to end.
Interesting.
Of RFQs or auctions. And we have 2 variants of automation, a level 4 automation that follows a prescriptive process. And we have level 5 automation where machine learning can train the bot to find smarter and smarter strategies so that it can drive greater and greater value.
So I wonder if you could share some, like an example or a use case for each one of those so that listeners can actually visualize what that looks like, what it looks like in practice.
So a use case for optimization and a use case for automation. Is that
yes, please. For? Yeah.
So one use case for optimization, a classic example is transportation, where you could have hundreds of lanes. Mm-hmm. And you have to deal with multiple suppliers because no single supplier will serve all your needs, and they don't have the coverage you may require.
Yeah.
So you have to gather bids on individual lanes, and there could be hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands if you're a large enterprise of these origin destination pairs. And gathering all of that data from what could be dozens or hundreds of suppliers is very time consuming.
Right.
So optimization is about collecting data in a structured way, and an optimizer will find the best value for money outcome for you. And you can kind of direct the outcome as well. So you can add constraints and say, I only want 7 suppliers, or I want to keep 50% with incumbents. And the optimizer will respect those constraints and preferences and find the optimal outcome. So and then the use case for automation, it would be, let's say you have tactical buyers buying ingredients or professional services, and you have higher frequency of sourcing events. So, and each one is of smaller value, but it takes time to set up an RFQ or an auction and run that process. So instead of having somebody in procurement gathering information from a requester about what it is they want to buy, that they converse with a chatbot and say, this chatbot is a sourcing bot. Mm-hmm. So it's a structured conversation where it asks all the pertinent questions and it finds out what it is you're going to buy, what you want to buy. And the bot will decide who are the most appropriate suppliers to invite, what's the most appropriate bidding mechanism, what data cleansing rules should be applied, and what scenarios should be evaluated and reported back to the requester as the options, with a recommendation to say, this is our recommended option, but which one do you want to choose?
Interesting.
And procurement only has to decide to approve, if they want an approval step, to say, we approve of this. And otherwise, they have no work to do whatsoever in that tactical buying.
So the questions that the bot would ask for the requisitioner, are those kind of conditional? So based on how they would answer, it would then change the next question to them, or is it pretty structured?
Exactly.
You know, this is 5 steps. We're going to ask these same 5 questions every time.
It's a decision tree based upon the responses gathered. So the appropriate questions it should ask will depend upon the data it's collecting as it goes. And the actions then it takes in the sourcing process depend upon the information gathered. So it is intelligent automation where actions are contingent upon the actual data being processed.
Right. And so for example, then when it recommends to you, these are the suppliers that you should consider, is that from a pre-approved like procurement list, or is it something from the database that you have collected? Can it be either or, you know, depending on how an organization wants to configure it? What does that look like?
So there's a kind of a rules-based approach amongst a set of qualified suppliers at present. That's the way it's working today.
Mm-hmm.
And we envisage that in future it will be recommending suppliers that you should consider inviting that may not be in your list of qualified suppliers. So that's not where it is today, but later this year that's where it will be.
Yeah, to head towards like supplier discovery. I imagine at some point when you have the data to do so as well, you can start seeing who other folks are using and build that into the kind of machine learning logic to recommend that for this kind of category, these are the suppliers that are used the most, for example, and it's not a supplier that you're using today.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the key thing, and why intelligent automation is so superior to robotic process automation.
Mm-hmm.
That you can learn from historical bid events, and you can start to learn across organizations. So instead of, let's say somebody's going to market and it's a road freight bid in California, that if it's a road freight bid in California, they should only be recommended suppliers that have been competitive on lanes in California.
Yeah.
And the recommender should be basing recommendations based on the semantics of past road freight events, where it has inspected the origin destination pairs and it knows what carriers are bidding on lanes in California.
Mm-hmm.
So for intelligent recommendations to be valuable, that's the level of sophistication that is required. And I would say this is a very important aspect of automation, is that people only want automation when it will deliver superior results than somebody who would operate the same process manually.
That's interesting from a change management perspective, that's what you see. That it's not necessarily to make the process more efficient, but only when they know there's additional value over and above that.
Exactly, because there will always be opponents of automation and those that argue that, the job won't be done as well by a bot. And you have to be in a position to counteract, credibly counteract those objections and
mm-hmm.
say the bot does deal with the nuances that a human expert would deal with too, and that it can deliver that standard that a human expert can deliver, but it can also deliver greater speed, greater scale, and must be cheaper to operate. So it must win on all counts.
Mm-hmm.
It's Pareto optimal, if I would say. Whatever a dimension you judge it by, it needs to be better than the human, because to overcome that objection.
So you mentioned from a sourcing optimization perspective, logistics as one of the kind of key areas where the complexity exists. That there is it's so much value add in running it through a different process, if you will. I just wonder if there's other categories that you often see that lend themselves to sourcing optimization software like you have at Keelvar.
Yeah, so because transport is the most common, because people just simply run into big trouble with large events and they must have an alternative. But there are many other categories that may not be as large or complex, but can see bigger benefits in terms of either savings or speed. And some of those categories include the likes of temporary labor, parts, materials, facilities management, and packaging. So any categories where you need to contract with a multiplicity of suppliers, and how you blend those in the optimal way, that's where you should be introducing optimization. Even if you're doing things and it's feasible to do it in Excel, when you move to optimization, you'll see faster process, bigger savings, and much better strategic oversight in the trade-offs and managing the trade-offs between cost and non-cost objectives. So it's a false economy to think, and I would say still to this day, majority of large organizations think that they're saving money by using Excel to manage some of these projects that are in Excel, and it's a terrible false economy that's costing them so much money indirectly.
So for folks who will come to Keelvar and they're interested in using the sourcing optimization technology, for example, that you have, do you typically do that on a project basis, or do you recommend people start with one particular project as a proof of concept, or how do folks usually engage with you?
So it depends on whether they've used optimization before. Any company that's used optimization before, they already understand the business case, they understand the value, and they're typically switching from another vendor because they want, let's say, their aim is maybe to increase adoption of optimization. Yeah. And because we focus on ease of use, and we've had a huge emphasis on UX in our development of our app, that's what we focus on, and getting twice as many users on board or twice as many events is typically an aim. But if an organization has not used optimization before, then you have to kind of help them understand the significance of what they've been missing out on. So it's aiming for a proof of concept, where a proof of concept might involve, it's typically more than one project, it might be 3 projects. And we deliberately encourage companies to go for breadth. Yes, transportation should be one, but you should definitely look at least 2 other categories, so that you get a sense of the breadth of applicability of optimization. Because there's a real danger you get pigeonholed as the transportation solution, and some organizations go for years just looking for transportation and not realizing they're missing out elsewhere. And it's just that's a trap that organizations should not fall into.
So do you find that, there's a lot of talk within procurement and looking at priorities for 2020 about automation? Is that something that you're seeing, that truly there is a renewed interest in automation from the procurement leadership community?
Yes, our feedback from CPOs has been that most CPOs we've spoken to is that automation is their number one priority for 2020. And the key challenges that they're saying to us that they have are around the instructions they're receiving from board level, is that there's no more recruitment allowed, or they need to do more with fewer numbers of personnel, smaller teams, but they're being asked to increase the coverage of spend management. So they're effectively trying to do more with less. And for those companies, automation is the key to unlocking that capability.
Well, Alan, I want to thank you so much for joining me today on the pod. I have one last question, and that's just that if anyone who's listening, they've had their interest piqued by the potential of automation and intelligent automation in the procurement space around sourcing optimization, where's the best place for them to find out a little bit more and learn more about Keelvar?
We have a resources section in our website on keelvar.com with things like white papers on automation and what it's all about, and we'd be happy to share examples of use cases as well. So we work with companies on getting started in individual categories in automation because we realize that there's an education aspect to this where organizations are trying to understand what's different.
Right.
What's the difference between RPA and intelligent automation? And what can intelligent automation deliver above and beyond robotic process automation? And I think when companies see the significance of automated systems that have AI and have reasoning about the data passing through the system, then they'll be impressed.
All right. Well, what I'll do, Alan, is I'm going to link up to that resource center from your website on our show notes page that will accompany today's episode. For any listener who wants to go there, that'll be at artofprocurement.com/podcast, and then just search for Startup Series or Keelvar, and you'll find the links directly to that resource center. So, Alan, just one last time, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for tuning into this special startup series on the art of procurement. To listen to the entire series and for the show notes pages that accompany each episode, please go to artofprocurement.com/startup series.